I don't really like the term best wine. I often ask people what's their most memorable wine. And when it comes down to wines that are really memorable, it's not always what's in the bottle. Often it's where you're at and the people that you're sharing it with. 2024 was a wild ride for me. The first half of the year, I faced a lot of personal problems, a lot of business problems. I'm not asking for any sympathy. We all go through it. But as the saying goes, if you're going through hell, just keep going. The last 6 months of 2024 were absolutely unbelievable for me. The travel, the experience, I feel very blessed and privileged to do what I do. During the course of 2024, since February, I've lost about 35 pounds. You can see it in some of the older videos or videos that I'm still posting. I did some rough calculations between judging 6 major competitions this year, all the samples I tasted, plus going to industry tastings, other press trips. I tasted over 3,500 wines in 2024. The last quarter of the year especially has been coming fast and furious. I've got so much to do, but I've also moved to a new place. I'm working on a new studio, so you'll see that in the coming months. I'm a bit stressed out right now, but we're gonna get this done. It was a crazy year for my health as well. I got shingles on my face. That's why I have this scar. Several people have commented on it. And just in the coming weeks, the 3rd edition of YouTube for Dummies has come out, and I have a 1.5-page feature in it. I feel incredibly blessed. But you're not here for that. You're here for the most memorable wines of 2024. Let's get going. I'm going in chronological order, and let's start out early in January. I got together with my collecting group where we meet every single month. We drink, we taste some incredible wines, we taste everything blind. But in January, the theme was fortified wines, and usually we have anywhere from 10 to 15 people in attendance. For some reason, we had only 6 people, but one of my closest friends in the group opened a 1907 de Oliveiras Madeira Malvazia from Portugal. I love Madeira, and when he opened it, my goodness, the perfume, the musky cologne, the flavors just engulf the room. And usually with 10 to 15 people, you get a nice sized glass. But since there was only 6 of us, I drank 3 full glasses of that wine. Madeira is one of the few great wine regions that I have yet to go to. I have to make it there. I love Madeira for the acidity. And these wines are just indestructible. They last forever. And Dr. Charlie, I want to thank you for sharing that wine, because for me it was a real memorable experience. Just about a year earlier, Constantine Baum sent me a little sample of an 1845 Madeira that he opened, and it was special. But man, I don't know, maybe it was just the company, the fact that I got 3 big glasses of that, it was a real special wine. My first trip of 2024 was to the spring edition of Mundus Vini, one of the largest competitions in Europe. And during the evening sessions, sometimes they put together programs. And in this program, they put together producers from Piemonte to show off their Derthona wines made of Timorasso. At these social programs, not all the judges take part. Sometimes people want to rest. Sometimes people have work to do. Every single judge signed up for this dinner, this tasting. Producers flew in from Italy to Germany to show off their wines. And then this producer really impressed me. This is the Vigneti Repetto. This is the Derthona. Derthona is the old Roman name for Tortona. This is made entirely of the grape Timorasso Origio 2018. So it has some age on it. This is not the current release. Producers that are working with Timorasso have, since there is high demand, they've done it right. They make the wines as high quality as possible, and the prices aren't cheap. I know that this wine on release is probably in the $40 when you find it in the USA. It's like the body of a Chardonnay mixed with the perfume, the aromatics of Riesling, the high acidity. This is not the most well-known producer. Massa is the producer that really saved this grape from extinction. I made a video about this is the world's next great wine. I even wore a sports jacket in it to be so serious. And when I did the blind tasting, this wine came up on top. It's outstanding. Producers like Vietti, other great Barolo producers, are making a Derthona because they realize the greatness of this variety. And also, if cost is a factor, look out for the Piccolo Derthona. Those are like the Petit Chablis to the Chablis. They're more affordable wines made with younger vines. About a month later, I traveled to Croatia, more specifically Dalmatia, Croatia, for the Rosé edition of the Concours Mondial de Brussels. Concours Mondial de Brussels is a competition that travels throughout Europe. There are 4 main sessions. This is the first year I've done Concours Mondial, which I was really excited about because a lot of my friends do the competition, and over years, whenever Concours Mondial comes up, I get a little bit envious. I shouldn't be envious because I get to travel a lot, but for some reason, since all my friends there, I get envious. I was even on the Rosé Champagne panel, which was awesome. Afterwards, we did a several-day press trip throughout Dalmatia, Croatia, and I'm familiar with a lot of producers, but it was nice to keep up with the vintages, see what was new. On the last day, we did a tasting in Dubrovnik, the pearl of the Adriatic, with producers from Kanavle. It's a valley south of Dubrovnik. And there's a producer there, Crvik, who I've kept my eye on. I really like Peter, the winemaker and the owner, and I've always thought the wines were good, but haven't moved to great quality. That has changed completely as they've really stepped it up. And you know what? The wine that really blew me away was their Gran Rezerva Merlot. It was called the Lorko Gran Rezerva. I know, it's a Merlot from Southern Dalmatian, but this thing was ripe. It was complex. It was really a spectacular Merlot. The only problem is it's in tiny quantities. You'll probably only be able to find it in the country. But good job, Peter. You're doing great work. After Croatia, I came home for about 6 weeks. I shot a lot of content, and then I started traveling again. The next press trip, I went to Vipava in Slovenia. It's on the western part of Slovenia. It's right on the border of Italy. It's an extension of the Collio region. There's some brilliant producers making macerated wines. I was only there for a few days, so I got to revisit and retaste some of the producers there. Vipava, first of all, is a gorgeous, gorgeous valley. It's this like corridor that links Central and Eastern Europe. It's one of the biggest regions in Slovenia, but you don't see a lot of vineyards because they're tucked away, hidden in the different villages and the different mountains. I'm familiar with a lot of the producers, but I found this brand new one, which made me happy because I lived in that part of the world for quite some time, or I used it as a base to travel through. This is the Santei. This is the Foreleg 2022. So it's a fresh macerated wine, a blend of Chardonnay, Malvazia Istarska, Malvazia Istriana, Sauvignon Blanc, and Rebula, are also known as Rebula Gialla. I think I just really connected with this couple that both were working corporate jobs. They came back and took over the family vineyards. They started producing wines. These are minimal intervention, stripped down wines. But man, these are gorgeous. If you've ever got the chance to have some of these small producers from Slovenia, these macerated wines are chewy. They're fun. They still have a lot of fruit. The tannins are soft. A lot of the times, the good producers are not funky. These wines can be hauntingly complex. This is a Demeter certified wine, so it's a biodynamic wine. It was really cool to see a brand new producer making excellent wines in this small country. Right after that, I flew to Campania for Campania Stories. This is in the south of Italy. Campania is right under the region of Lazio where Rome is. The biggest city in Campania is Naples, Napoli, one of the great cities in Europe in my opinion, really crazy. Campania Stories is like the anteprima of Campania, so all the different regions are there. It was the first time I was attending the event. I'd been wanting to go for a long time. Campania with Mount Vesuvius. You have the crazy city like Naples. You have grapes. These grapes can be found nowhere else on the planet. There are some really exciting wines being made there, and I had a great time. I was there, I think, for 6 or 7 days, maybe even longer. I spent some time with Andrea from the famous Marisa Cuomo from the Amalfi Coast. He's one of the great producers of Italy. But the wine that took me by storm and the wine that was really memorable to me was the Masseria Felicia. This is the Falerno de Massico 2014. This is a blend of Piedrosa and Aglianico. This is made in the same area where the ancient Roman wine Falernian was made. Falernian could be either dry or sweet. It was probably oxidized. The Romans even developed a cruise system because they loved the wine so much. Pliny the Elder used to say that he could light it on fire with a match, maybe because it was a high alcohol wine. This is nothing like it, but it was grown in the same era, and I think I was just touched. What happens at these anteprimas is you taste hundreds of wines in the morning, and then you break out and you do little press trips, visit producers. I was put on a program to visit this producer. We drove to an area. I think there were about 7 to 8 journalists. Most of them were Italian. We got in different cars with different producers, and we drove. I remember I was having a little bit of a migraine. I get migraines maybe once, twice a year, although this year I think I've had a little bit more than that. We went to this producer. I was not feeling well. Masseria is like an old farm. It was just basically a rundown farm. We were sitting outside tasting the wines. The whites were kind of okay. And then the producer started pouring this. And what I was just really touched. This is just everything that I want in a wine with character. It's not super expensive. In the US, you can find current vintages of this for 28 bucks. In Europe, I think it's under 20 bucks. It's smoky, it's mineral, blackberry, raspberry flavors. Just ridiculously complex, a wine that over-delivers from the price. And I was really touched. He was telling me a little bit about his wife who passed away, who was the owner. They were one of the pioneers of the area, and they really got their claim to fame when Robert Parker discovered them. I think it was in the 90s, gave some of their wines pretty good scores. They became one of the benchmark producers of the area. The wife died, so they took a couple years off from making the wines. But when I just saw the husband just pouring these wines humbly, with passion, it's like, man, this is what wine is all about. A few weeks after that, in June, I traveled to Mexico for the Concours Mondial de Brussels Red and White session. It's the biggest edition of the Concours Mondial. It travels all over the world. Next year, it's in Ningxia in China. I'm really hoping I get an invite. I think it was like the second or third day. I had a great flight that included Romanian wine, some producers I was familiar with. Afterwards, we had lunch in some village in Mexico. They put together a little carnival. I got completely toasty on mojitos, which they had out. And then one of the Italian judges gave me a Tuscan cigar. I was smoking. I was like, man, I'm in Mexico smoking a Tuscan cigar after I just tasted a bunch of Romanian wines. At dinner that night, I went out with some of my oldest friends in the wine business, mostly from Hungary, Serbia, and Croatia. We were sitting there in Mexico sharing wines, laughter, eating. I thought, man, this is really a special moment. I don't think it can get any better than this. But I was wrong. Afterwards, we went back. My friend Rasmus from Denmark, who I'd met at Concours Mondial de Brussels Rosé competition early in the year, he was inspired because whenever I go to these press trips, I bring wines to share with people at night, especially American wines, because my European friends can't get to taste them. And he decided to bring a white Burgundy. He brought a Domaine Henri Boillot Pulginy Montrachet Premier Cru Clos de Mouchere 2017. First of all, it was great white Burgundy. But second of all, we were all sitting together in Mexico around the pool in the hotel. And I thought, man, this is what wine is all about. You want to share those special bottles with people that you like, people that you love, people that you care about. I came back in the summer and I had a dead period with travel, but I was busy producing a lot of content. I decided to launch my video podcast series, which I have some cool guests coming up soon. I'd like to do more of them. It's just finding the time, getting our schedules to collide. But I met up with my friend Eli, who owns Eli Wine Company in Birmingham, Michigan. It's a suburb of Detroit, a pretty wealthy suburb. And this is the reference when it comes to French wine. I think he has 5,000 references of French wine in the shop. And we tasted a few wines. And in it, he showed me the champagne producer. This is Champagne Laherte Freres. This is just their basic champagne, the Ultra Tradition Extra Brut. I usually like Brut champagnes because I want a little bit of sugar because of the high acidity. This was just balanced and delicious. And I think what I liked about it, I just had such a fun conversation with Eli. He was so open, candid with his knowledge, struggles, and successes in wine. People really loved it. I think you should check out the podcast. And this champagne was everything I want. It had the perfect balance of fruit, mineral notes, and that toasty, biscuity bread notes. And after we were done tasting it, he's like, if you want to take this home, you can. And I never say no to champagne. If there's one wine I want to drink every single day, it's champagne, followed by Riesling, and then maybe Sangiovese. Just a few weeks after that, my friend invited me over to his lake house, and he's been struggling with some personal issues. It was just him and I, his family were out of town, and I had just shot my Super Tuscan wine blind tasting video, which is already out. And I brought with me the Grattamacco 2020. I think the exact blend is Cabernet Sauvignon Merlot with a touch of Sangiovese. And we were just sitting there talking about life, his different struggles. I also brought a white Burgundy, which he liked, but we didn't really finish. But when we opened the Grattamacco, yes, it is young, from Bulgari, one of the original Super Tuscans. We kind of just sat there in understanding of how great the wine was. We stopped talking for a little bit and we polished off the bottle. It was really a special moment. I also got to reconnect with him. I had been his roommate my sophomore year at Michigan State. I don't get to see my college friends as much as I used to, especially when I started traveling, when I started living abroad. So it was just a really special bonding moment. It was great wine, bonding, reconnecting with an old friend. Right after that, I started connecting with the local wine scene and I got invited to a backyard Alsatian tasting. It was just a casual tasting where people brought old Alsatian wines. We tasted everything blind and there was one thing we were stumped on. We could not figure out what the grape was, and this was the wine. It was the Domaine Weinbach Vendange Tardives Gewürztraminer Fürstenum 2002. First of all, Domaine Weinbach is the first producer that made me fall in love with Riesling. When I really started drinking wine more seriously, I thought red wines are the only serious wines. When I had a Domaine Weinbach Grand Cru Riesling, that's opened my eyes and I was like, wow. This is how great Riesling can be. This is how great white wines can be. When we were blind tasting this Gewürztraminer, which I have to admit, I'm not crazy about Gewürztraminer. This is a late harvest sweet Gewürztraminer. A lot of us had problems figuring out what it was. A lot of people thought it was Riesling. And when we revealed it, I was like, man, Gewürztraminer, a grape that's low in acidity, this baby can age when done well. The end of August, that's when the year really started picking up. I went to the summer edition of Mundus Vini. There's 2 a year, and I'm going to both editions every single year. One of the judges is actually one of the best biodynamic producers in Germany. Makes great Pinot Noir, great Chardonnay, great Riesling. The producer is called Frank John in the Pfalz. He invited me and a few friends over to his house at night. They were crushing Pinot Noir that they had just picked, but they took the time, him and his family, to make a little dinner in their garden, all homemade cooked food. We sat in the garden under candlelight and he started opening his wines, and his Pinot Noir is great. But the thing that blew me away is he opened a Frank John Riesling Brut 2019, a method traditional, a champagne method sparkling wine. And this thing was great. Riesling can make fantastic sparkling wines, and after time, it does get some of that diesel petrol-y notes. But I think the fact just sitting there with him, who, when he talks about grape growing, I feel really dumb. I feel like I know a thing or two about wine. There's a lot I have to learn. But man, when he's starting talking about potassium in the soil and leaf coverage and all this, I just feel completely dumb. He is a really bright guy. And then sitting there with a good friend from Italy who's an Italian journalist I see often all around the world, it was just a special moment. And that wine was beautiful. And then it's always awesome when you open a Magnum. If you ever want to go to a party and just kind of really make a splash, bring a Magnum of a sparkling wine. You'll be the star. I come home to a plethora of samples. I shot a white wine video, which I haven't put out yet. It's why white wines to me are more exciting than red wines, especially where I am right now. And one of the wines was the Tenuta Capofaro di Dim Malvazia from Salina in Sicily, 2022. This is made of the grape Malvazia di Lipari, which makes tremendous sweet wines. The only places I've seen it vinified as dry wine is in southern Dalmatia and Croatia, where they call it Malvazia Dubrovačka. It makes pretty rich, phenolic white wines. That's why I like it. They can be super complex. The sweet wines are, of course, great. Malvazia di Lipari is a Passito wine. It's spectacular. But it brought me back to memories of Salina. Salina is one of the islands in the Aeolian Islands, just off the coast of the bigger island in Sicily. When I started traveling around the world, taking a sabbatical in 2015, I went with my then girlfriend at the time. I rented a scooter, went all around the island. We climbed the 2 volcanic peaks. We went to the west coast, the village of Palara, which to this day is maybe the most spectacular European village I've ever seen. It sits right on a cliff that falls straight down in the Mediterranean Sea. The sunsets, I bet, are unbelievable. It's super picturesque. A lot of Italian films were shot there. And that's why wine is so cool. It's all about memories. I recommend going to the Aeolian Islands. Go to Salina, and then also nearby is Stromboli, where you can climb the active volcano and see it explode at night. I remember when I visited, I was up there. It's a 0 to 900 meter climb, so close to 3,000 feet elevation climb. It's a pretty steep climb, and you just see the volcano exploding. You have to wear a mask because the smoke comes into your face. Just an unbelievable experience. After that, I actually started working retail, which I am enjoying so much because I get to interact with people, see what real people are drinking. How I started my crime career was around wine writers, especially in Europe, and you're going to all these small producers. Everything's great. Everybody kind of likes the same type of wines. When I started working retail, I was like, wow, people's palates are super diverse. I juggled my travel and working in the wine shop the second half of the year. But just a few months after I started working in that wine shop, I traveled to Georgia, where my wine career started. Yes, Georgia, the country, not the state, where I judged the Imeretti Wine Challenge, real small competition run by my good friend Katie Gerhadze, which ironically, she was on my panel when I did my first Mundus Vini and my first Concours Mondial. It was a small competition. It was a competition that was awesome because it wasn't about giving medals. She said, you have to be as critical as possible because I'm giving the feedback to these producers on how they can get better. And during the second evening, we visited this producer. This is the Chateau Labara Sulicuri. This is a Quavri wine made in Georgian clay pots, buried underground 2020. Got a beautiful label, it says Circumsolum on the front. It's in a beautiful spot, valley. You see the mountains of Georgia. And I think I connected with him because the owner went to graduate school in Atlanta, Georgia, where I went to graduate school at, and we were there about the same time, ironically, although we didn't know each other. He came back to this small village because he wanted to make something there that would draw people in, that would keep young people in. His Quavri wines are incredibly clean. Georgia has come a long way since I started my wine career around 2015, 2016, where not all the wines were clean. Some were dirty, some were kind of undrinkable. This is beautiful. Sulicuri also has this unique floral note, little dandelion, a lot of white flower notes, white peach. And it's macerated. It just makes really, really nice white wine, and the tannins aren't too strong. I don't know if he's exported yet, but this was a brilliant wine. Right after that, I flew home, and then a week later, I flew to New York City for a week, the wine spectator experience. That whole week, I tasted and drank some wines. It just, it was just really incredible, blew my mind. But right when I landed, I got off the airport, I landed in JFK, took a taxi right to Del Frisco Steakhouse in Manhattan. And that's where I met with Luisa of Yalumba, one of the largest family estates in Australia. We tasted a lot of her wines, some young, some aged. We tasted the Virgilius. This is the Eden Valley Viognier 2022. This is a single vineyard Viognier. In the US, it's about $50. And the funny thing is, Winebow, the importer, offered me a sample of this earlier in the year, but I was like, I don't think so. I'm not excited. I'm not interested, and I don't have any content where I think I could try to fit that in. But Luisa, first of all, was so passionate about Viognier, and she was passionate about pairing Viognier with steak, which I have to say actually worked. And when I tasted this, I was like, wow, this is an impressive wine. It's so impressive. I asked for a sample because I'm going to do a blind tasting video between a Condrieu and this Virgilius to see who comes up on top. This is a fantastic wine. Viognier, even though it's a white grape, it's low in acidity and has phenolics that can act kind of red wine-ish. A lot of casual drinkers just really like Viognier, but this is Viognier for serious wine geeks. I recommend tasting it. This wine was just so memorable to me because it changed my perception of a variety, and that's what makes a wine special. The next day, I went to a portfolio tasting, a celebration of vineyard brands, and they had some spectacular wines on offer. They had opened some Salon Les Menil, which is one of the most expensive, one of the greatest champagnes. They had some Burgundy open. They had some Old Madeira open. I think I could just make a great hits of that tasting, but the two that stuck out to me, first of all, there was the Salon Les Menil. I can't remember what vintage it was, next to a 2000 Delamot. Delamot is owned by Salon, but it's just a little more affordable. And the 2000 Delamot, to me, blew the Les Menil out of the water. It was just ridiculously toasty. I love the flavors of old champagne. You get some toastiness, some nuttiness, but this still had some fresh fruit flavors. It was from Magnum. And wines, of course, age a little bit better in Magnum because their development is a little bit slower because there's more wine to air ratio. This was, it just said a lot because Salon Les Menil, I don't even know how much that wine is. I think it's like $1,500. Right next to that, we have the Domaine de Lambray, Clos de Lambray, Red Burgundy 2019. And that was special to me because that is just what everything that you want about red Burgundy. The haunting flavors of perfume, leather, raspberry, a little bit of strawberry notes, and just the tannins were perfect. It was drinking spectacular on release. I have made a pact early in the year to taste and get more into Burgundy, which I have this year. I've tasted some great bottles. I've drank some Clos de Biz, Chambertin. I've had the opportunity to have some Mazzi Chambertin, some really spectacular stuff. But man, the Clos de Lambre might have been the best Burgundy that I've had this year so far. It's not often that you get to have lunch with wine royalty. I went back to Del Frisco's the next day and had lunch with Johann Henschke of Henschke in Australia. They're famous for Hill of Grace, one of the most expensive Shirazes in the world, and I have an upcoming video about this. But to me, their best wine was their Cereal Henschke Cabernet Sauvignon. I had the 2018, and to me, it was more of a red-fruited, perfumed, delicate Cabernet Sauvignon. It's made in tiny quantities. It's not their most popular wine. It's not cheap. I think it's a $300 wine. You'll see my conversation with Johann Henschke in a little vlog I did about that whole week in the Wine Spectator. He talks about it's really the site. Not many sites can do that, and I agree. It's very rare. Cabernet Sauvignon, I know it can make great wines. I love Bordeaux. Napa, I'm not as crazy about in general, although the top Napas can be extraordinary. They're just so expensive. But man, the Cereal Henschke was something that gave me goosebumps. And it's a wine that if you're a Cabernet lover, if you're an Australian wine, if you're just a wine lover in general, I know it's expensive, but if somehow you can find a way to taste it, it's worth checking out. I followed that up by attending the Wine Spectator New York experience, and there were some great wines being poured. Things like Massico, Cheval Blanc, Haut-Brion, all this top-end stuff was being poured. But you know what really impressed me was a wine that you'll find for 28 bucks. This is the Love Block Pinot Noir from Central Otago 2021. I think I liked it because there were all these big name wines being poured, and of course, people are rushing to those booths to taste the benchmarks. And you had this little humble producer here just pouring. Oh, I say humble. It's actually owned by Kim Crawford. You know, the Kim Crawford Sauvignon Blanc. When he sold that brand, him and his wife bought a plot of land. That's what they love. That's why they call it Love Block. Started making Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, and I think they make some Riesling. I got sent a pack of samples of Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Gris. Not the Riesling because it's not in the U.S. And this Pinot Noir, it's just... I've poo-pooed on Central Otago Pinot Noir before in the South Island. I prefer Martinborough in the North Island because it's more kind of Burgundian. But Central Otago, you get those approachable red fruit flavors. It can be super delicious. And that's what you get here. You just get a super well-made Pinot Noir for 28 bucks. And I just gave them so much respect. All these great wines being poured, they're pouring this humble $28 wine. And I thought it was fabulous. It's a wine that you can find. I can recommend trying it. The Sauvignon Blanc is also good. And that can be found for 20 bucks in some markets. I told you there was some great wines being poured at the Wine Spectator New York experience. But for me, my favorite wine there was a Riesling. Surprise, surprise. It was the Enniskillen ice wine from Niagara. But it was the Riesling ice wine that I thought was spectacular. 2021. Ice wine to me can sometimes be just too fruity, too concentrated. But this had a little development right away. In the acidity. When you have sweet wine, great sweet wines, you want acidity. You want it to wash your palate clean. I think it's spectacular. I'm going to be tasting their Vidal ice wine against other great sweet wines in an upcoming video. I'm just waiting for a few more samples to come in. But man, don't sleep on sweet wines. I think as you get into wine, I know me personally, I think sweet wines, the Great World's Great Sweet Wines, are the most magical transformation of grape to wine in the world. You can see why in the past, these were the wines of kings. Because back then, we didn't have processed sugar. We didn't have Coca-Cola. If you had a beverage that was super sweet, super delicious, and got you a little bit tipsy, no wonder it was the wine of kings. Good job, Canada. I'm going to try to make it to Niagara, I think, in January or February. It's just a few-hour drive from my place. October was a crazy month for me because right after the Wine Spectator experience, I flew to Korea to judge the Asia Wine Trophy. I am Korean, although I'm adopted. This is the second year I've judged the Asia Wine Trophy. I think it was the fourth time I was in Korea. And in this time, I felt more Korean. One thing I've struggled with my life is I've grown up playing basketball, so a lot of my friends were white or black, and I just wanted to kind of be one of them. But being Asian obviously was a little different. And it was so funny. I was never not popular. I was prom king, all that kind of stuff. But something in the back of my mind, I guess, maybe a little bit of identity crisis. But in recent years, maybe it's coming with age too. I guess I feel a little more proud. I started my wine career in Europe where all these different people have their own people, their own ethnic groups where they feel proud to be part of that tribe. I guess since I travel so much, I go all around the world, I guess I don't start to forget where home really is. And I guess it was just nice to be in Korea and just feel more Korean. But I had some spectacular wines at the show. After we judged the competition, it was in conjunction with a wine show, the Daejeon International Wine Expo. My friend that helps run it, Sean Jun, had a great idea because he loves Eastern European wines just like I did. He did a tasting of Grand Cru French wines versus Moldovan wines. We had a panel. I was on the main panel of critics. There were a bunch of journalists from Korea in the crowd. There were a bunch of wine professionals. I have to say, one thing that, I'm not saying this is better or worse, I was the only person in the crowd and on the panel that in all 3 sets picked the French wine as my favorite wine. Whatever, I'm not saying that I'm better or worse, but I just thought that was interesting because a lot of people picked Moldovan wines, and in the last round, there were 5 wines. 2 of them were French, Chateau Telbo and Chateau Lafon Rocher, a wine that I love so much. And the wine that most people picked was from Moldova. This is the Bad Boys. This is the 2019, because I have an upcoming red wine blend video, but the 2018 is what people preferred. It's a blend of Fetesca Negra and Saperavi. Fetesca Negra is a grape that has like these incense flavors. Saperavi is a dark-skinned, dark-fleshed grape. It's a Tenturier variety. I remember when I first went to Moldova back in 2019, Bad Boys was the wine that I was most impressed with. I said it tasted kind of like a baby coat roti, and I didn't know the winemaker back then. I didn't meet him when I visited Moldova, but for some reason, he saw some of my posts, so he just started to like me. He was there at the competition judging, and when that was revealed, it was almost like he was brought to tears. And I became really close to him in that moment. I was teared up a little bit because he was moved. He didn't even know his wine was going to be in that competition and the tasting. I think that's why I like Eastern Europe so much. You have these small producers that are doing their best to make the best wines possible, and there's some great wines made. This wine, I think, is only available in Germany. It might be exported, maybe the UK a little bit, and then you can get it in Moldova. It's a wine that I think in Moldova is like $20. It's outstanding. I know in recent years he's blended a little Cabernet or Merlot in it to round things out, but it's really a good wine, and the 2019 shows up in an upcoming Red Wine Blends video that I've shot and edited, so stay tuned for that. Just a few days later, I went to my friend's wine bar. She actually came to my masterclass when I did the Asian Wine Trophy a year before. I did it about Croatian wines. She came back and we talked a little bit, and she invited me to her wine bar with my friend Simon Wolf, who wrote Amber Revolution. It's like the Bible when it comes to orange wines. Him and I sat down, we were picking through some of the wines, and she had Klinec Rebula 2018. Klinec is from Goriška Brda in Slovenia, an extension of Collio, Italy. Actually, probably the whole region should be called Goriška Brda because there's more vineyard area in Slovenia than there is in Collio. This is one of my favorite producers, not only in Slovenia, in the world. Tiny producer, makes 20,000 bottles a year. Alex Klinec is a great, happy guy. They used to have a restaurant. They have had to shut it down, and the guest house, because his wife has gotten a little bit ill, which makes me a little bit sad. But in that moment, you know, I'm not drinking as much lately because I taste so many wines, and a lot of times I don't want to drink, maybe more than a glass, but I drank like 2/3 of that bottle, sitting there with Simon Wolf, one guy that's always been friendly to me in the wine industry. When I started in the wine business, not everybody was super friendly to me. Actually, most people were not. Simon has always been supportive of me. We sat down, we polished off that bottle. Not only is it a great wine, it was just a special moment. Klinec's wines have a signature style. I like how his orange wines have these tangerine peel type flavors along with these earth and white pepper notes. And man, if they are exported around the world, but it's tiny quantities, any of his wines, if you can find them, I would just say drink them. I came back and I joined another tasting group, another local tasting group, more friendly. I really like the concept. It's called OMG. The acronym means either oh my god or old but maybe still good. It's this wonderful man who invites us over to his house and opens up old wines from his cellar. Sometimes it's BYOB, but mostly it's opening wines from his cellar. This edition was a BYOB, and of course, my favorite wine was a Riesling. It was a Dr. Birkeland Wolf 2002 Forster Riesling Ausschlesi, so it is a sweet wine. And everybody, it was one of the last wines, and when everybody drank it, they were like, wow, this is impressive. I had visited Birkeland Wolf earlier in the year when I did Mundus Vini in February. Spectacular producer. But the thing about Riesling, when it comes to sweet wines, there's so much electricity. It is just insane. This is a spectacular, it's got sweetness, it's got the mineral flavors, it's got lemonness, it's got, you know, some white peach notes, got some baked apple notes, but white pepper even, but that acidity is like electricity, man. It washes your palate clean. And it's Riesling, baby, my favorite grape in the world. Next, I did a few tastings with my main collector group, and one of my favorite guys, Dr. Charlie, invited me to dinner with his friends who were coming in from LA, also wine collectors. We went to our usual spot, and he dug out wines from his cellar. And man, he brought some spectacular wines, some old Sassicaia. We even bought a 1989 Latour off the wine list, which was stellar. But the wine of the night was a 1998 Cheval Blanc. From the right bank of Bordeaux, half Merlot, half Cabernet Franc. It was the wine at the end of the film Sideways. Everybody remembers the famous line in Sideways where Miles poo-poos on Merlot.
No, if anybody orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I am not drinking any fucking Merlot!
But what they don't know is he also poo-pooed on Cabernet Franc in the film.
Well, I will tell you something. I've come never to expect greatness from a Cab Franc, and this one is no different.
And then ironically, his most treasured possession was half Merlot, half Cabernet Franc. It's a wine that's one of my favorite wines in the world. Yes, I know it's a label wine. It's a label drinker wine. But it's never disappointed me. It's always impressed me. And I haven't drank it many times. I think I've had it 5 times in my life. This 98 was in a half bottle, which I have right here. Wines in half bottles, they mature a little bit faster. There's less wine, so there's more air to wine ratio. And we could tell it was a little bit more developed than the other wines. Like we also had a 98 Sassicaia that was still a baby during that tasting. But this Cheval Blanc, it just hit all the right spots. Got all the blackberry, black plum notes. But Cheval Blanc has this mineral hit to it that I absolutely love. It could also be the label, but it could have also been the company as well. Dr. Charlie is always super generous to me. I try to share as many unique and interesting wines with him as possible because he's so generous to me. But man, what an evening that was. My last press trip of the year was Torossi and Campania in southern Italy. I just got back a few weeks ago. And I had 3 really memorable wines on that trip. I have a Torossi blind tasting video coming up, so you'll see that soon. The first of those wines that was really impressive is after the first day, what happened is that the first day, we tasted a bunch of current releases of Torossi. I think we tasted 50 of them in the morning. Then we went to a producer to visit Borgo d'Angelo near the village of Sant'Angelo. It was a quick visit, and he took us across the street. We were all a little bit hungry. It was later in the afternoon. It was like 2 o'clock. We hadn't eaten lunch yet, and we thought, oh, we're going to eat? We stepped into this little provision shop, this little coffee shop. So some of us were disappointed that, oh, we're not going to eat. And then there was like a secret door to the back where we sat in this private room. All the journalists, myself, we sat down to this really rustic, delicious Italian lunch. And the producer, the owner, I don't even know his name because he only spoke Italian, showed all his wines, including some aged Torossi. But the wine that really took me by storm was his Irpinia Campi Tarassini 2019. Irpinia Campi Tarassini is one of the great red wines in Italy that people don't know about, especially because it's affordable. It's a young Aglianico made from vines that don't fit into the Tarassi zone, also made from younger vines. Think about it as the Rosso di Montalcino to Brunello di Montalcino. So you have Irpinia Campi Tarassini to Tarassi. These wines are affordable in Europe. They range anywhere from 10 to 20 euros. They're more red fruit driven. They're fun. They have that perfect mix of fruitiness with a little bit of seriousness. You have some producers actually aging them in amphora too, which is really cool. But it's just, we were all sitting down just to the surprise lunch, which was spectacular. And this wine was just so delicious. It went with all the foods. And that's the thing about wine. The most memorable wines don't have to be the greatest wines in the world. They just have to be delicious, and they just have to capture that moment with people that you love, people that you like, people that you want to have conversations with. So thank you, Borgo d'Angelo. Later, I think it was that same evening, we were sitting down, it was after us, and on these press trips or these wine trips, the best things, the most memorable things often happen when you're drinking late at night or tasting late at night. I was with my friend Christy of Christy's Wine Travels. That's her IG handle. And her and I have started this tradition. When we are on trips together, we bring wines and then we bring people together to bring and taste them. And she just got back from Spain and she brought this wine. Ocean Viñas Viejas, which means old vines de Segovia. 2020. This is made of Verdejo. This producer is in the Rueda appellation, although he doesn't call his wine Rueda. This is barrel fermented. It says pre-phylloxera vines more than 150 years old, aged 9 months on the lees with regular stirring. Barrel fermented. This was the greatest Verdejo I've ever had. I was sitting there with one of my friends who's a champagne expert. She was blown away. This to me was very white Burgundy in style. It was It was spectacular, and the importer noticed my posts, and he sent me this and some other Spanish wines that there'll be in upcoming content. But I'm excited he sent me a bottle of this, even though I already tasted it, because this is just This is what gets me so excited about wine. I have maybe 1,000 bottles in my cellar. I don't have all the big brand names, but I have unique grape varieties, good wines, and that's the thing. You don't have to spend a fortune. There are great wines out there. You just got to taste, fight hard and find them. Find people that you trust. I don't know what this wine is. I think it's probably $50 in the US. It's probably a lot cheaper in Spain. Spain, to me, in recent years, I want to spend more time in. I found a lot of these small producers making wines like this that are actually pretty darn affordable. It's just the Spanish aren't the best at marketing. And, they're too busy enjoying the good life, and they're enjoying their domestic products at home. This is well worth checking out, guys. And to close it out is a wine that I drank just 2 nights ago when I moved into my new place. I broke my new pad in with this, one of my favorite producers in the world, also from Vipava in Slovenia. Look at Slovenia, has 3 wines on this list. This is the Mlečnik Ana Cuvée from Vipava. This is a blend of Chardonnay, Sauvignon, which is also known as Friulano, and Rebula Gialla. This is macerated 2018. There's 11.5 alcohol. This is all I can say. It's not often these days that I can drink an entire bottle of wine myself. Maybe I'm moving into a new place. It's a new chapter in my life. I polished this entire bottle. I was not planning to. I thought it was absolutely delicious. And this wine ages really well. I remember years ago when I had a 2004 of this wine, and I remember myself and some other of my wine friends, Simon Wolf was with me at the time, looked at each other and we were like, wow, made by a father-son team making 15,000 bottles a year with an old school basket press, extremely low yields. My only gripe with them is their wines are, I think, a little bit too affordable. I think in Europe, maybe this wine is 25, 30 euros. I know it's not cheap, but when you look at things like Gravner, Radicon, I think it's a bargain. Just a spectacular wine. I was just with a collector today in the shop, and he said, I don't like orange wines. I don't like macerated wines. I said, I'm going to get you the right one. It can change your mind. Hauntingly beautiful. So these are my most memorable wines of the year. What are yours? I'd love to hear. Drop it in the comments below.